Welcome to Between the Covers, the show for readers and writers and lovers of books. I'm Stephanie, and I'm a publisher at Red Penguin Books, where we publish books of all types and genres. So if you have a book in your head, a book on your computer, or maybe even 300 sheets of loose leaf shoved in a drawer, visit us at redpenguinbooks.com and unleash your inner author. And yes, Deborah, I see you laughing. At least once a month, we do get an envelope filled with loose leaf. We just finished typing one now, so it happens constantly. We also receive faxes, so we're just really old school over here. I'm very fortunate to be joined by three authors who have unleashed themselves today. Deborah Hawkins is the author of The Best of No Small Thing, Mindful Meditations, and you're just going to love to hear about that, especially in this chaotic season. Some mindful meditations can do some good. If, on the other hand, you like your chaos, Michael O'Keefe is the author of Burnt to a Crisp, a Detective Paddy Durr novel. So if you like a little angst in your life, this is definitely the way to go. And finally, Mary Helen Sheriff is the author of Boop and Eve's Road Trip, an award-winning novel that you're just going to want to hear about, and you're going to love meeting her and hearing how this book evolved from kind of Eve to Boop and Eve. I love that story. But first, Deborah Hawkins, the author of The Best of No Small Thing, Mindful Meditations, was launched in 2010 with the intention of reflecting on experiences that generated feelings of gratitude in order to create a positive mood and orientation in life. As of the fall of 2019, over 500 reflections have been published, along with over 100 tips that can be employed in a gratitude practice. I keep hearing how important gratitude is, so I think we have the queen of it here. Please welcome author Deborah Hawkins. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Stephanie. It's great to be here.
Oh, so thrilled to have you here. And 500 meditations. That's a lot of meditations. Tell us a little bit about this project and how it came to pass.
Sure. It's kind of interesting when I think about my background. I always like to write, but I always thought I would write something from my imagination. I like to make up things. And yet when I went on in life, it was hard to be a writer, as a published writer, as an author, a novelist, whatever, short story writer. And I sort of did practical things for a while. And then I was very depressed. I had like childhood trauma and lots of things to get over. And I realized in my early 50s, I was at a very low point in my life. I had to do something to bring myself out of depression and to look more positively at things. And I realized that a lot of things had to do with my own intentions, my own decisions about where I wanted to place my attention. So I decided I would start a gratitude practice, a little bit different than other gratitude practices, where you just like list 15 things at the end of the day that you are happy about. I mean, that might be great to get you thinking about more positive things than negative things, but basically that puts everything out of your control. You're not in control over getting good parking places, or whether the guy you have a crush on calls you back or whatever, you know. So I wrote little reflections about things that happened in my daily life that I really appreciated or I could feel grateful about. And that started lifting up my mood right away. I realized that once I started this writing practice, I was always looking for those things to write about. So there's like a positive thing from that angle, but I experienced an added boost when, after about 2 or 3 years, I read everything I wrote already. And I posted about once a week, and I read everything I wrote. And I realized I tended to write about a handful of themes. So I decided I had personal gratitude themes. And I realized that I believe that everybody has personal gratitude themes. So besides writing from my intention to see things I can appreciate in whatever life presents to me, I also know what my themes are. And knowing what your themes are makes it easier to spot what you love, or what you value in whatever is presented to you. So I've found this really to boost my life. And as you mentioned, the world is pretty chaotic now. And we can't count on things externally to give us pleasure. It's really important to know what we could value in and of itself, and learn how to train our own minds to see those things in the world that we actually just experience.
I love the way you're proactive about it. You're so right. I hear people that do gratitude, I'll say, that they just write down 5 things every single day in a gratitude journal. And while I think it's important for us to be able to look back and say at the end of a day what we're thankful for, you're much more proactive about it, not just kind of sitting by and waiting to see what happens, but being the change that you want to see.
Right. I think that's really important, that gratitude is not only a Sunday school virtue, a little chance to feel good. It's like a confidence builder. It's really empowering to believe, to know that you could see something you can appreciate. Maybe not something you love all the time, but something you can appreciate in almost every day. And my book is pretty simple. It's very accessible for anybody to read. Like, it could be like older people or younger people, or people who are sick, or men or women. It doesn't matter. I write about whatever is like in front of me that I have feelings about. So I've written about like the difference between lemons and limes. Like, I think it's it sounds simple, but it's so wonderful that things are unique, that things have their own special difference. I wrote a blog post about the ice maker in my refrigerator. I think it's wonderful that I don't need to make ice to have chill my glass for martini. So I think it could be very simple things, or catching the train before the doors go shut.
Right. And besides the meditations, you said there are tips also. And you know, this is a chaos season. What's a good takeaway for all us? Something we could do right away.
Well, one of the things I actually teach I run a Zoom enabled workshop called Helium for Your Heart. Elevate your outlook with intentional gratitude. So one of the things I teach in that class is, if you take your cell phone and look at some of the pictures, that's a picture of my dog. If you take your cell phone and just look at the photographs, you might like think about things you don't normally think about that you really love to have in your life. And you can look at the photographs you take, whether it's on your cell phone or old scrapbooks, and realize what you might really value. And then I suggest a whole set of like exercises to go into that further, to boil those down into your personal themes. Right. But I think things to be happy are all around you. I tell the story sometimes, and I don't want to abuse my time here. I remember like being at a grocery store in a checkout line, and I was waiting in line, and I was miserable because the line was long, and I looked around everybody else in line. And one of my themes is belonging. I feel good when I feel like I belong to like I'm of the same group as other people. I'm having the same experience. And all of a sudden we just looked at each other, everybody in line, and we started laughing because we were miserable, but we all were in the same boat.
Right.
And there was something kind of uplifting about sharing that moment with other people. So it doesn't have to be a big thing. The stories in my book, there's like 50 posts that I actually took from my first 10 years of blogging. And it could be very simple, but the stories are very relatable. Everyday things that if you think about, there's something you could appreciate in them.
Fantastic, fantastic. I love that because it is a time that we need to look at that. Look at what we can do to step back from, shall we say, the chaos and move on with it. Thank you so much. What's next on your agenda? You're working on any new books?
I'm going to make another collection in another year or so. I do have a thought actually about that I want to make into a book related to how to look at photographs to really understand yourself better. I think Jung had the phrase that about making the unconscious conscious. So I think there's so much power in that. It doesn't have to be complicated, but if you look at something and you ask yourself questions about that, you could learn about yourself. And I think we know so much that we don't use, like what to build on. Instead of just reacting to things, look at things we want to build on.
You're absolutely right. Thank you so much. Our next author guest today, Michael O'Keefe, is the author of Burnt to a Crisp, which is a Detective Paddy Durr novel, book 3. You're going to find out Mike's quite prolific. And he writes, Detective Paddy Durr is burnt to a crisp. He just can't catch a break. His beloved wife, Mairead, is dying from cancer contracted working at Ground Zero after 9/11. A vindictive police department psychiatrist is out to take his guns away for spurning her advances. The corrupt mayor and his insidious, scheming wife are her allies. Even the big chiefs in the NYPD can't protect him anymore. On top of all this, he just caught a disturbing triple homicide. The innocent victims cry for justice. He is blocked from getting to the truth by a local drug lord who put a gag order on the neighborhood. Durr's options are few and the clock is ticking. He can feel his life crumbling with each passing second. With little hope of success, he perseveres. He'll need all his skills and experiences to crack this one, but time and all the odds are stacked against him as he is left to pray for a miracle from a God he is sure has forsaken him. Please welcome author Mike O'Keefe. Thanks so much for joining me.
It's a pleasure to be here, Steph. Thank you.
Oh, always a pleasure. You've been on what, 2, 3, 4? You might start winning an award for how many books?
I'll be by to pick my mail up tomorrow.
Certainly do that. How many books are we up to at this point?
Let's see. I have 5 altogether. There's the novella, there's the short story collection, there's the trilogy, the Paddy Durr trilogy, and I have 2 finished novels in my computer that I'm in the editing process for. And I just began a historical novel about World War One. That is kind of writing itself. It's running away with it. So
wow, well, that's a new genre for you.
Well, I'm kind of branching out. The next novel I put out isn't going to be a Paddy Durr novel. It's actually a 1979 college basketball point shaving scandal type of deal. Takes place in Brooklyn, and it's based on things that actually happen. But what's nice is I get to delve into my old high school basketball career and put people that I grew up with in the books under different names.
Well, so. You are a classic write what you know, which obviously you were not around in World War One to write what you know, but.
No, and it's actually difficult to find first person accounts of that war. Everybody's dead. But you know what? It's unexamined. It's called oftentimes it's called the Forgotten War. And I think if we examine what exactly went wrong and why the whole world slid into that conflict, it's kind of instructive about what's wrong with the world today still. So, and you know what? If not for the faulty peace of World War One, there never would have been a World War II or an Adolf Hitler for that matter.
Gotcha.
So we just keep making the same mistakes, and it's fodder for writers.
Well, we'll get you back on here when it's World War I time. But
Okay.
now it's book 3 of Paddy Durr time. So just for our viewers who haven't had the chance to meet you over and over and over, like myself, tell us a little bit about you and how you started writing detective novels.
Yeah, I'm a retired homicide detective from the NYPD. Approximately 25 years. If I had not gotten hurt and disabled, I'd still be catching murders in Brooklyn. But I retired. It's going on 13 years next month. And I was threatening to write a book, and my wife got tired of hearing it. So she bought me a laptop, threw it at me, and said, just write the damn thing already. And Shot to Pieces was born about a year later. And I discovered that I have to write. It's a compulsion. It's as essential to my existence as food and exercise. So sleep, not so much.
It's amazing to find out something about yourself kind of later in the game, to find out that you have to write.
Yeah, well, you know what? I always wrote from the time I was in 7th grade, but all through my career, my writing basically was consigned to investigative reports. You know, follow-ups on my investigations, which I used to get in trouble for because I would write them as narrative stories. Because I discovered early on in my career that if I don't tell myself a story, I won't remember it. And then when I get up on the witness stand, the trial, nothing comes out.
Okay.
So I would write my investigative reports in a narrative style with some editorializing that shouldn't actually be in investigative reports. And my supervisors would be like, why are you doing this? I'm like, don't worry about it. I'm the one that has to justify it on the witness stand. And because I had 100% clearance rate for murders and never lost a case, they just let me do what I wanted. So.
So 5 books later, here you are, and still going strong.
Yeah. 5. Well, 2 that are finished, 7. I'm on my 8th novel already. So.
Wow, that's a lot of novels. Now, I assume a lot born from experience, but we changed the names to protect the guilty. Is it that kind of a thing, or?
That's always been my policy. Yeah. All of my crime novels are based upon my own homicide cases.
Okay.
In some instances, I changed the name, changed the time frame. And I'm speaking sometimes about 15, 20-year-old homicide cases, but I'm making them contemporary in the newer books.
Gotcha.
And, I mean, murder is murder. It lends itself to any era.
Now, how about the living people in your books? Are they all of your partner, yourself, guys in the?
Oh, yeah, I mean, you know who I like. Very clearly in the books on how I treat them, but by the same token, you know who I don't like because I treat them accordingly. I have people who do not speak to me anymore from my past, which is great because that's why I did it. I was done with you before you were done with me, and now you're in a book. You can put your hand up and admit that that's you. Or we'll never speak of you again. You know, generally, we never speak of them again.
So even with the name changes and all the details are changed, we know, or they know. Mike O'Keefe put me in the book.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a glorious sensation, and you learn as a writer, particularly a writer of murder thrillers. Don't piss me off. I can kill you in the next book. So, and I settled a lot of scores. I wasn't treated well by everybody. Had a very eventful career, and some people just, they're not your friends. Now they are memorialized in perpetuity as such.
What about on the good end? Do you have people who are saying, hey, I want to star in your next book. Can you put me in?
Yeah, one of my old partners, Johnny Moynihan, he's presently a sergeant. He's still on the job. He's in the terrorist task force. And in Shot to Pieces, I gave him the name Sean Moran, and he had a good part in the book, particularly in our younger days when we were in plainclothes running around Upper Manhattan getting shot at every day. But Johnny, to this day, like when he calls me up, he calls me Paddy Durr because he wants to hear me call him Sean Moran. And I've been at police functions where he's introduced himself to people as Sean Moran. I get the biggest kick out of that.
That's funny. So let me ask, who's going to play Paddy Durr in the movie and who plays Sean Moran? You have it precast in your head?
You know what? I had it, but as time goes by, the actors are getting too old to play it.
Well, I assume Paddy Durr's getting older in the books too, no?
Yeah, I'm actually, if I'm going to continue the series, it's probably going to be about his son, Patrick.
Okay.
And then I'll continue to write contemporary novels. But for right now, I kind of wanted to step away from the police procedurals. Gotcha. It's not a good time to be writing about cops. The whole woke media has pretty much, they just make it too difficult.
You decided World War I is a safer topic.
Well, we'll do the basketball thing first.
Oh, that's right, the basketball thing.
Yeah, and then we'll do World War I, and we'll see what else I feel like writing about.
Where it goes. So did you play basketball in high school?
I did. I played. Well, I wasn't very good. I was an end of the bench guy. Basketball was basically an off-season running program for football and baseball.
Okay. So I guess you play football and baseball.
Yeah, and my main character of that next novel, it's going to be called Covering the Spread. I based on Chris Mullen.
Okay.
If you're familiar with him, he's a Hall of Famer. I actually played CYO and high school basketball against him.
Seriously? Oh, I didn't know that.
Although by the time I got to high school, I got to watch him play because I was on the end of the bench and never took my warm-up top off. And he lit it up. He was, but I based my main character on him. If A, he hadn't grown to be 6'7", and B, if his parents were abusive scoundrels, if you will, which was not the case. I actually knew Chris's father very well. He ran the youth center down at St. Thomas Aquinas in Flatlands.
Yep, I know.
One of the reasons why Chris got as good as he did, he had the keys to the gym.
I didn't realize he was a Flatlands boy and he was playing at Thomas Aquinas gym.
Yep. And from there, he went to Powell Memorial and he transferred to Zavarian, won the state championship at Zavarian, and then was All-American at St. John's for 4 years.
Yep.
So.
And his jersey still fly there, you know?
Yeah. He was something.
Good stuff. Well, tell me something. Since you write so much about personal experiences with a spin, I'll put it.
Okay.
Any tips on somebody who has, I mean, my life is not nearly as colorful as yours, Mike, so that would not be my genre, but other people who have wonderfully colorful lives and say, I should write a book. How do they start?
Well, first of all, you have to recognize that color isn't necessary. If it's not neurotic, it's not worth talking about. No, it's, to be perfectly honest, if you've had an interesting life, you're kind of casting yourself as the hero of the book.
Okay.
If you're going to write a hero's journey, which every book should be, or every story should be, you have to be introspective enough to realize you have changed over time based upon the challenges that you've had to overcome. If you don't have the introspection to go through those changes, to put yourself through those changes, don't write about yourself. Research someone else and write about them. So that's the only advice I would give.
I like it. That's different. You didn't tell me knock out 5,000 words a day before you have a cup of coffee. Much more about figuring out who you are.
I don't really have rules with respect to how much I have to work every day or how many words. It's like I'll get that itch, I'll get a twitch, almost like a pang. As a former smoker, like I really need a cigarette. No, I don't need a cigarette. I need to sit down and I need to write. I need to advance the story. So the story should be whatever it is that you're working on. And right now it's getting a little fractious right now for me because I'm working on 3 things at once. But whatever you're working on, you should be working those stories in your head when you're doing other things. Like I'm in the gym maybe 2 hours a day. I'm writing that whole time without ever touching a laptop.
Gotcha.
It's spinning, I'm developing, I'm working dialogue in my head. So at some point, if you're doing that, you're in the process. If you're in the process, it doesn't matter if you're physically writing it down. I mean, at some point you have to do that or it's not writing, but just be in the process. And then the stuff will take care of itself. At least that's been my experience.
Sounds good. Can't wait to see this next iteration that's coming from you. That's for sure. Something new. Well, for something new, our third author today is the author of Boop and Eve's Road Trip. And our author, Mary Helen Sheriff, writes that Eve Prince is done with college, with her mom, with guys, and with her dream of fashion design. But when her best friend goes MIA, Eve must gather together the broken threads of her life in order to search for her. When Eve's grandmother, Boop, a retiree dripping with Southern charm, finds out about the trip, she, desperate to see her sister and also hoping to alleviate Eve's growing depression, hijacks her granddaughter's road trip. Boop knows from experience that healing Eve will require more than flirting lessons and a garlic festival makeover. Nevertheless, Boop is frustrated when her feeble efforts yield the same failure that her sulfur-laced sip from the fountain of youth wrought on her age. She knows that sharing the secret that's haunted her for 60 years might be the one thing that will lessen Eve's growing depression. But she also feels that if she reveals it, she'll lose her family and her own hard-won happiness. Boop and Eve's journey through the heart of Dixie is an unforgettable love story between a grandmother and her granddaughter. Please welcome Southern fiction author, Mary Helen Sheriff. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, so thrilled to have you. And wow, you know how to write a book description that makes you want to read a book. Good for you.
Thanks.
Absolutely. But I love, and I know that I got a quick little preview because you and I were chatting about the fact that this was not actually supposed to be Boop and Eve's road trip, was it? I love that. And please tell us about that because that's the wildest thing I've heard in a long time.
So I started the book as a young adult novel, and it was going to be Eve's story. And I had this idea of a girl who was, had been a victim of a helicopter mom and had gone away to college for the first time and just couldn't handle it because she didn't have any coping skills because her mother had, bubble wrapped her whole life. And I decided that maybe mom let her go there because her grandmother lived nearby and, so that would make it okay. And then grandma starts visiting and it's I keep writing, grandma just keeps coming back and suddenly grandma's taken over half the book. So half the book is from Eve's perspective and half the book is from her mom's perspective. And by young adult rules, half a book can't be from an 80-year-old narration and we call it young adult. So it became women's fiction. And I ended up making Eve just a little bit older, just to, make it even a little bit more women's fiction.
I love that. I love that image of, I always say I love the pantsers among the writers who discuss sitting down to type and saying, oh my God, what just happened? And things happen. And your story is like, wow, Boop just took over this entire story, didn't she? That just.
Yeah. And what the funny thing is, I'm not a pantser. I had an outline. It's just that Boop kept showing up. And even when she was in a scene, it just became so much more alive. Like, I think that when people read this, like they feel sorry for Eve, but they love Boop. And they love Eve too, because Boop loves Eve. Like Boop totally is like she ends up being, she's the beloved character.
But those are the best characters when you're writing. And the great thing about it is in the process, you don't realize how much the book is going to be about them.
Right.
They insist upon themselves and they just make it a stronger story because it's happening organically in your mind.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
And she didn't just steal one scene. I mean, she jumped above her in the title.
That's true. That's true. Sounds better though to say Boop and Eve than even Boops. I don't know.
I get that. I get that.
Use
Now,
the
Boop is an
expression-
actual name, is an actual nickname.
Yeah. So like
What is
Betty
it
Boop.
referred to? Is Betty? I thought it might be a Betty Boop reference.
Yeah. So her real name is Elizabeth, and she was supposed to go by Betty.
Right.
But people called her Boop. And this, I was kind of going with like, at least in the South, like my grandmother's generation, her and all her friends had the wackiest names. We called my grandmother Hootie. Her husband was Sonny. We called her father Shaky and her mother EE. Her sister-in-law was Lamb. And anyway, it just kept going, like from one person to the next. And I thought, well, she has to have a wackadoodle name. And I kind of used my grandmother as an inspiration for the character of Boop. So Boop and Hootie kind of have a similar sound to them. And
Gotcha.
You describe this as being like Southern fiction. What makes something Southern fiction?
it's set in the South. So they started in Florida and they worked their way up to Virginia. And it just has a lot of the cultural resonance of the South. Boop is full of Southern like idioms. So the way she talks is very Southern. And they eat Southern food and they go to like Savannah and, you know, just a lot of things that are maybe rich in the Southern world.
It's a perfect book to read on a road trip around Dixie, that's for sure.
There you go.
Driving around, that's what you should be reading. See, there's books that are good for certain places. Like if you're in Brooklyn, by the way, you know what you should be reading from this show. You know, but definitely next time you're cruising through the Carolinas and Georgia on a road trip, or I love that you call it a love story between a grandmother and a granddaughter.
Yeah, I think that's really what resonates here. I mean, it's more about their relationship than anything that actually happens, and more about, you know, Eve is lost. She doesn't know who she is. She's never had a chance to figure it out. And so Boop kind of helps her see her future and make her own future rather than the life her mother has planned for her. And you know, Boop has made a huge mistake in her life and has she's regretted it her whole life. And it's been kept a secret, and Eve is going to help her unleash that and do it in a way that doesn't destroy everyone, though it will seem like it does for a little while.
Well, tell me about your writing, because this just amazes me. What happened to that outline? At some point you said, yeah, this is not working. I'm just deleting that file on my computer. What was that turning moment that you said, no?
I just re-outlined. So, you know, every time like I'd finish a draft and maybe Boop had like 2 scenes and I'd be like, well, I really should add a scene here and here and here, you know, like, so it was a continuous process. I rewrote this thing. An insane number of times. So I can't even guess how many drafts it had. But I kept just re-outlining. Like I write an outline because it gives me direction, but if the story goes somewhere else, that's okay. But I have to know where it's going. Or think I do. It's pretend control.
Pretend control until they put a cover on it and you say, oh, is that the title?
Yeah.
Now, for your next project, you said this was supposed to be young adult. So tell us about writing now.
Yeah. So when I started writing my next book, I thought, well, I just published a women's fiction novel. Everybody says, you know, you got to stick in the same genre for like 3 books. That's the smart thing to do. Build your platform before you go crazy. And so I started writing this book with the woman as a 28-year-old. And I got through, I kind of wrote like a screenplay first to capture the plot, and you know there's lots of dialogue, but when I got to the end of it I was like, oh my gosh, this book would be so much better if it was young adult. There's, you know, it's a bit of a love triangle, and one of the men is kind of controlling, and not kind of, very, and if she was younger and more vulnerable, it adds a resonance to it that when she's 28 isn't the same. And plus the novel's dystopian, and there's just such a giant market for YA dystopian that I was like, I'm forcing this to be women's fiction when in fact what I really want to write is YA. So I'm doing the opposite. Instead of moving from changing a book from YA to women's fiction, now I'm changing a women's fiction book to YA.
I love that you have such clarity about where your book is genre-wise. And this is a great takeaway for authors and future authors watching this, is how important it is to know what you're writing, where you're going to place it, how you're going to sell it, and what choices you should be making because of what you're calling it. Because, I mean, let's be honest, people want to pick up a book and they are absolutely judging a book by its cover, but they're also judging it by its compatriots. All we know is what shelf it's on in the proverbial store. Mm-hmm. If the author is confused themselves by whether this is, women's fiction or YA or whatever else it might be, and if the author doesn't know, well, then how the heck is the reader supposed to know and get on board with it? So your clarity is amazing, and I'm so glad that you consider that part of the process. Figuring out, I thought it was this, okay, I don't have to keep it there forever, but I have to acknowledge that it is not this, and it's really this. That's fabulously insightful. I know a lot of people who their book is already published and they still have no idea what it is.
I think I learned it the hard way. I have 3 other books that are sitting, on my computer, and I think I read a lot of different genres and enjoy a lot of different kinds of books. And so when I write, I am a little bit less focused than I probably should be in those first few drafts, because it's not like I only read mystery, so I can write a mystery, it's like I might read a mystery and then I might read a romance and then I might read a thriller and then I might, like all over the place. And so a lot of elements from different genres, I think, influence my writing. And I want to write this book that's everything for everyone. But unfortunately, it's hard to sell a book that's everything for everyone. You need to sell a book that's something for someone. And then you hope that everyone else finds it and notices it, because those people love it so much that the word spreads from there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I am so thrilled to have 3 people who are getting the job done. And I always say, our show is to get people to buy your books and read them. That's for sure. But they say 90% of the population wants to write a book, and you 3 have written, a dozen between you. So the fact is, you are rock stars. What will get other people started? Is it that knowing that first book is going to take you 10 years, so just suck it up? Is like Michael's wife bought him a laptop and threw it at him? What's the secret to getting started? Because I always think if you could at least just get started, then you can maybe become a rock that's rolling downhill. Deborah, how about you? How did you get started, and what can you tell our future writers about getting started?
I've actually read a few friends' books they've written books as memoirs because they wanted to put their life in context. They might have wanted to tell their grandchildren about some of their early experiences or whatever. And I came to the conclusion that it's wonderful to sell a book that you've written, but if you have a book in you, you need to write it down. Regardless of whether, you might be guided by the market of it and you might want to make a career out of it. And it's a very worthwhile thing. But there's something about making your life and what you value and the stories you invent real outside of your imagination. And I think just going through that exercise is a really wonderful thing.
Oh, I think you're so right about that. If you've got that driving need of getting it out, you want to share it with your family, whatever it is, an itch that needs to be scratched, do it. And it's, yes, we talk a lot about marketing books and things like that, but just for a personal fulfillment is such a great reason to get things done and get it out of you, and something to be grateful for afterwards. That's for sure. Michael.
Good tie-in.
Mike, how about you? You've got other friends perhaps retirees who say, I got stories, I should write them down.
Well, the basic, well, a lot of cops think that their careers are book worthy. Maybe they are. But the problem is, you telling me an interesting story at the bar, that's a war story. Every cop has them. If they don't go anywhere, if there isn't a higher purpose or message, if it isn't a hero's journey, Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, if the main character isn't fundamentally changed by what he's had to overcome during it, you don't have anything. Just buy my books and read them. You'll be happy. I've had to tell a lot of guys, hey, big guy.
I want to say,
you don't have a book in you.
I really admire your approach to this, because I know a lot of people that love mysteries or thrillers, and I've never really gotten into those genres that much, because I really love quirky narrators or the act of discovery. I think all stories are about discovery. And likewise, I think if a main character is not changed from what he undergoes, it's not worth reading. And very often writers be very proud that all the ends are tied up very neatly, but it's like, so what? So I really really love whatever it's about, that the hero or the main character really undergoes change.
Well, and the other aspect of it is, if you're writing a complete story, it's not just the genre. It's a love story. It's a human interest story. It's a psychological drill down on the character. If you're not getting deeply into those elements, you're not writing anything worth reading. And I validate that point of view every time I'm doing research for another novel, because I'm reading other novels. I mean, for instance, this World War I saga that I'm writing, I'm rereading Great Gatsby for about the 12th time. Those characters are well formed. Fitzgerald drills down. He gets to the crux of the character, and that includes what's wrong with the character. And he puts it all out there in beautiful language, and he lets the reader make a value judgment, good or bad. That's a story. If you're not doing that, if you're not challenging your reader, you'll probably lose them, if you're lucky, 30 pages into it.
Well, I'm so glad you're also drilling down to the point that if you want to write, you should read. And that's huge. You should also read Michael O'Keefe. But if you want to write, which you did say, which I love that. But if you want to be a writer, read, because then you're going to see what works and what doesn't. And if you don't know what the hero's journey is, and if you were not sure about, whether you've got enough flesh on those bones there to make it stand out, great. Get reading, that's for sure. And that's just awesome. And you know where to start with Michael O'Keefe's books. Mary, how about you? What should writers do to get started? Think about first.
I think if you've been bitten by the writing bug, you should go ahead and write your story, see what you got. And then I think that you should know that there's tons and tons of information out there about the craft of writing. And once you have a draft, you can do things to it to make it better. But you should do that. You should study structure, as Michael was talking about, and you should study character and all those good things. If you want to publish it, I mean, and maybe you don't, but step one is figure out it, write a story, see what you got, and then go from there, and know that there's plenty of ways to learn how to write better. But you gotta have something to start with.
Yeah, no, you are absolutely right. And I'm so thrilled to hear that all three of you have something else that's going to be coming up, which is great. But just to remind all of our viewers of what they should be getting now, holidays are upon us. So if you are shopping, the best of No Small Thing, Mindful Meditations by by Deborah Hawkins. And you could also visit her website at nosmallthing.net and learn more. Burnt to a Crisp, the third of the Paddy Durr novels by Michael O'Keefe. And please visit michaelokeefeauthor.com for more information about all of his books and to get on his mailing list so you can find out about the new books. And finally, Boop and Eve's Road Trip. MaryHelenSheriff.com is a great place where you could learn more about the author and make sure you keep track of things that are coming up. So whether you have somebody who's a women's fiction lover, road trip lover, ex-cop or aficionado, or maybe someone who just needs some peace and space in their life. Some great shopping tips here for all of you. And thank you to my authors for joining us. You've been fabulous, and please keep me posted when your next book comes out so you can join us between the covers. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Thanks for joining us on Between the Covers. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you're an author who would be interested in appearing on our show, or perhaps you're a member of a book club, we do host book clubs as well, please visit BetweenTheCoversTV.com. By the way, at BetweenTheCoversTV.com, you can watch past episodes in addition to learning more about our authors and guests. So sign up there if you would like to be a guest on the show yourself. And if you have some books that you would like to get written or published, visit redpenguinbooks.com. Thanks so much for joining us.